I think you've got to have faith in something, because if you don't have faith, there's nothing. I'm not saying whether you're a Muslim, Christian, Buddhist or whatever, but you've got to have faith. And I think if faith is where, even if you have faith in your community, that to me is part of faith. My dad once said to me that there's only two types of people, rich and poor. And that's what you've got to remember. I think one of the things is with my generation, when we came in with certain ideas. And that's defined how we behaved. And most of the younger generation don't know. And once my generation dies off, nobody will know. Mine was unique because we come from an island, 4 villages in the middle of the river in Jhelum. In Punjab, Pakistan. And because in the summer the snows melt and you get the sort of rainwater coming in, we're surrounded by a river, so we never really knew anything about real heat. In the winter, the cold was just in the morning, right, when it's a bit cold, so you better wear a jumper or a shawl. And when the sun comes out, it's warm. In the winter, you slept inside and maybe a duvet cover. In the summer, you slept outside with a sheet just to keep the flies out. And you could sleep on the rooftops or anywhere else. The other thing we had actually unique for us is because we were in the middle of the river, we knew everybody in the 4 villages. For kids, it was paradise. There's no traffic, there's no strangers. We just walked everywhere, anywhere you could, as soon as you walked. And the other thing we had to do was obviously learn to swim before you learned to walk, because the river's always there. So as a kid, it was paradise. And the other thing we had was education had just sort of started. So you went to school when you were about 8, and you left about 13, 14. Because we worked in farms, worked with hands. What's the point of education? Our grandfathers, the fathers, and before them managed without education. So what's the point? So we just did primary education because the government said we had to do it. It was government policy. And that was it. Well, the story is of the myth of returning home. This book, I think, spells it out. What happened was when people first came in, the Asians, they came in with the idea they were going to either come here to make 50,000 rupees or work 5 years. That was it. Go back, settle there. And that sort of defined everything, how you lived, because you were here only temporary worker. And not only that, but that meant that when you came, it was only the men who came in. The majority of the family was back home. And the other thing in the 60s and 70s was they brought in young kids like me to get a bit of education. So education became very important. And it was very difficult for me to understand at the time. And one of the things my father said was, the way out of poverty is through education. And so it's very important to get education. But there was no sort of provisions made for people like me who didn't speak in English. I came in as a 10-year-old without a word of English. And the first sort of 6-7 months you put you back of the class and you sort of, look at the picture books and everything else. And what I learned was from my older brother, who'd been there a couple of years. So I learned the English, the basic English. And by the time I got to secondary school, just improved enough to know what was going on. My father had decided that he was an orphan. His father died when he was about 3.5. And then that plunged the family into sort of poverty. His mother died when he was 12. He only had an opportunity to go to school one day in his life. He's very bright. He was a water buffalo trader, which is like a horse trader. So you have to be light on your feet. And when he came to England, he decided that because he could communicate with people and he had to go through doctors, everything else, and even sort of write a letter, he needed somebody else to do that for him. And he decided that he would bring his kids over here so he could get a bit of education. And the idea at the time obviously was the myth of returning home. You go back and obviously get a sort of good job. Nobody ever found out what life was like in England. people go back and they talk about this, how much money they made, because that was the measure of the man, how much money they sent back. Nobody ever asked, how do you live? What did you eat? What's the weather like? What did you do for work? It was just the fact that they made a lot of money. And even when my sort of brother wrote letters back, the letters were not sort of personal letters. They're always community letters. Salams and du'as to all who read and listen to this letter. So it's not a personal letter. It's a community letter. And they were sort of very vague on what they did and what they ate. We had no idea what England is. Or rather, Vilayat. This is what we called it. If you said somebody England or Britain, nobody knew. If you said Vilayat or London, even if you were going to live in Glasgow, you knew. Now, Vilayat was something the soldiers called Vilayati. People could pronounce B, they called it Vilayati. But the point, we knew nothing about England. Nobody knew what the climate was like, what the food was like. And the idea was this myth of returning home, we're going to go back. I did not think that it was going to be that long before I returned. I returned after 11 years. Living in a village, there's flat roofs, animals, all the houses are different. When people went back, nobody asked them, right, how did you manage? How did did they speak any other language? You assumed, right, that they understood you. But when you came here, you understood that nobody understood your language. When I first moved to Middlesbrough, and the first time I went out, all the houses look identical. For the first few weeks, you had to memorize the number. I wrote it down, put it in my pocket, just to remember. Mixing with other kids, you couldn't play with them because you didn't know the language. You couldn't do anything else. Television was there, but the thing is, you couldn't understand what was going on. Radio was out of the question because you didn't understand what was going on. So it's just basically trying to go through books, right, simple books, and then trying to learn enough English to get by. One of the problems we had is because we didn't know English, people assumed you're thick. You didn't know the culture, you couldn't communicate with people, so you couldn't play with the kids. People always assumed, as soon as they saw the colour and the lack of a language, they were automatically assumed that you were thick or you're inferior because of the different colour. Even the school kids would say, we had the empire. And it wasn't until much later when I could say, hang on a minute, you did not have an empire. The ruling classes had an empire. You were just workers. And at the height of Queen Victoria, you had chimney sweeps, you had kids going barefoot. They were white kids. It only comes up when you know not just the language, but the culture, the history. But as you got older, you picked up the language, and with a bit of luck, you got a few qualifications. And I had 5 O-levels. That was good for my generation. I think like every other family, you just picked up the threads, but that's still the thing about the myth of returning home. You wanted the kids to get some education, so they got a better job. And then once they got a job, right, it was okay, right, we'll get them married off. And the idea was going to go back. It was arranged marriage. You go back, arrange a marriage, get somebody married, they come back, and then over time, slowly you realize that you're never going to go back. Now, the problem was that when you sort of grew up in Pakistan, the people you married, you knew, because we as Muslims are not supposed to have caste system, but you're living in India. Caste system was very prevalent. And even if you sort of married as a Muslim, you married from your caste, so you knew them. I noticed that there was a lot of problem with the arranged marriages. And I said, Dad, this is something that I'm troubled getting my head around. How did this system work in Pakistan for hundreds of years? The things have changed. The arranged marriages was because at the time you relied on the family over there. There's nothing else. Now, right, times have changed. And the other thing that I believe is that when a kid is going through school, so nursery, primary school, secondary school, no matter what colour they are, what religion they're British. The values are British. For kids grown here, you can't sort of do arranged marriage. I think arranged marriages do not belong in this culture. And so you wouldn't be, I think it's stupid to try and do arranged marriage. It just wouldn't work. And what we have in the Asian community now is with the parents, is if a kid comes home and says, Dad, I've got from this girl, I want to get married, and can you go and make it official? That's a face-saving thing that happens most of the times, and that's the best you can hope for. When I first moved to Middlesbrough, and there used to be Tower House near where McDonald's is, and I was standing there, and for some reason I felt I'm home. Now I don't know whether that was a relief from just after I left school or whatever, whether that came in. But as I sort of made my home, work and everything else, education, I got interested in the history. And it's really great to find out that the 1830s, this was just a farm. And you had sort of people coming in from Ireland, Wales, Scotland, Suffolk, all over the world. And the other thing was that the Indian people were here. There's a photograph I found in the Domus Museum of 1890s. There's 4 sailors looking in a shop, and there's nobody looking at them. They're not sort of something exotic. No, not even kids are looking at them. So they were part of the scenery. So they were here. And this is, I think, one of the things that I always found great about Middlesbrough was everybody was a foreigner. We didn't have this baggage of the old history. It's a farm, then it became a booming steel industry, and now, right, unfortunately, it's right down. It's just disappearing. I think community is just getting to know people and to say, right, okay, we are, as I said before, there are 2 types of people. There's rich people and poor people. We are poor people. Doesn't matter what color they are, what level religion they are. They're just trying to get by. And I think community is your neighbors. It doesn't matter what color they are, who they are, and that is the community. The Muslim religion is not just a religion. It is sort of a way of life. And also, the other thing people tend to forget is not all Muslims are the same. You know, they have to learn the prayers, they have to learn the Quran, and most of the time they don't know what they're reading, but they have to learn that. And if you're in Middlesbrough, you literally count how many mosques there are. They're not there because there's a need for that many mosques. They're there because they don't get on with each other. Well, I think it's just human nature. I mean, it's about power. Somebody, doesn't get on with somebody, okay, right, I'll go make my own mosque. And there's a slight difference whether you're from a different religion, which is sort of Sunni, Shia, Wahhabi, or you're different caste. Everybody wants to be the leader. One of the problems that we have as Muslims is that the majority of the Muslim leaders, and I would say there's no Muslim leader that can stand up to any of the countries. They're all sort of beholden to America or whatever, and they know that. Whether it's sort of blackmail, fear, bribe, and they should do that. Following 9/11, politicians, especially the Americans, found it very easy to blame the Muslims, because afterwards we discovered why. But the reason was because any Muslim was a terrorist, because you're a Muslim. Well, it makes you feel angry, but the point was there's nothing you could do. When people used to ask me, where you from? And it didn't matter who it was, whether it's white, brown or whatever, I used to say Pakistan. Then after a while, I don't know when though, after a while when people said, where you from? I used to say Middlesbrough. Asian people say, where you from? I would say Middlesbrough. Say, well, no, I meant, where's your granddad from? Then you go back. So there was a time, right, when you realize that this is home. And to be honest, if you go back to Pakistan, nobody remembers you. So this is home. Although, there's always been divisions. I think they become more prominent now. But the upside is that we have now the kids growing up here see it differently. They've got this British culture as well. Everybody founded this town. It was a farm. Industry came in. People came in everywhere. They all contributed. We're all sort of shaping the town as going on. Unfortunately, we lost all the jobs, and we lost it within a generation, because now most of the working class can't afford university education. And it's got people like Farage saying, the British values. Farage is a con man. Everybody knows that, right? But nobody's challenged him. So saying, you have a wife who's got a German passport. Your kids have German passport, and yet you talk about some British values. But the idea is to destroy the working classes, and then you have something with the rich people. We control everything, and so what they say goes. The media has become something of a sort of mouthpiece for the billionaires, and it was like the British Empire at the height, right? You had sort of barefoot kids, chimney sweeps, women working with kids working in mines, and if you sort of did something that they didn't agree, in the 30s there was the miners were locked out in Durham. This happened in February, middle of winter. Dispute was that the mine owners said the price of coal has gone down, so we want you to take wage cuts. And they were kicked out of their cottages. And these guys lived in tents. And I think this is sort of the way things are going. This is where they want us again. Now, once that goes, that's it. We are back to sort of the chains of slavery. The immigration policies have been sort of getting tougher and tougher and tougher each year. Each year everything happens. The students who stay here when they come in, study. For masters, the wages are going up something about 38,000. You've got to have a job that's 38,000 a year before you can apply. I think everybody tries to sort of seek a better life. How they do that is a different matter, whether they come to study or they marry here or whatever. To me, I think what will happen is anybody who comes in at any sort of time will slowly be absorbed in sort of, if you like, the British culture. And I think my kids and grandkids are British. I think I've been absorbed in the British culture. My way of thinking is British.